Hey guys, Fazzy back here, and in today's video, it is time for the annual franchise mode wishlist here for NHL 26 and beyond. So if you guys didn't know, I have made wishlist videos the past 2 years. I believe one year I did 2 of them, and then last year I just put out a longer one. This video, I can tell you right off the bat, is going to be one of the longer videos on the channel. That is because I have quite a few items here on today's wishlist. I believe the total is 35 or 36 different items that I would like to see implemented into future NHL titles. And just a couple of quick disclaimers before we get into today's wishlist. First off, this is a wishlist. This is not what I think is actually coming here to future games. If we're lucky, we may get a few items on this list over the next couple of years. And then secondly, some of these items may have already been in prior wishlist videos. This is just a huge compilation of everything that I could come up with here that I want to see in future games. So with all that being said, let's get today's very long video started with the first item on today's franchise mode wishlist. Starting out with one of the things I want to see the most, and that is cross-console roster sharing. So it's crazy to think that it has already been 3 years since roster sharing was added to NHL, that being in NHL 22, and to this day, we can still not share roster files across Xbox and PlayStation. You are locked to whatever console you are currently on. And as someone who puts out custom rosters regularly for the NHL community, I can't even tell you how many times I've had people on the PlayStation side of things asking if they can download the latest version of the custom roster. Unfortunately, I have to give the same answer every single time, that being that it is currently locked to Xbox only. But hopefully, NHL 26 finally brings this feature. This is something that I actually, could see happening in theory. Shouldn't be something that's all that hard for them to do. It's just sharing a roster file. I think, connecting players in online games together from Xbox and PlayStation would be more difficult, but that is just me. So hopefully it's something that we'll see added in the coming years. Up next, we have the reintroduction of GM Connected, or Connected Franchise Mode. We are now at the point that it has been over 10 years since we have last seen GM Connected in the NHL series. Its last technical appearance was in NHL Legacy Edition, which for you guys who didn't know, was NHL 16 for the Xbox 360. So that's 10 years, and the developers have been talking about bringing back GM Connected here for a couple of years now. They say it's high up on their wish list, they're investigating possibilities, and they're working on things behind the scenes. That was back 2 years ago now, in an interview that they confirmed that they are working on a return of the mode. So hopefully, 2 years with the development cycle, maybe we see it in NHL 26, if not hopefully for sure for NHL 27, as it gives players so many more ways to play, being able to take your franchise mode online, play against all your friends, and compete for the Stanley Cup. Next, we have the addition of custom logos. So I actually made a whole video dedicated talking about custom logos coming to the NHL community at some point down the road. There's actually a few items on this list where I did just make full-out videos talking about a feature I would like to see added to these games. But the possibilities for custom logos could be endless for the NHL community. You want to go online in ECHL with your friends? Throw up a custom logo of something that you designed? Go ahead. You want to design something for your Hockey Ultimate team? Go and do it. If you want to upload something for your offline franchise mode, start an expansion team with a logo you designed, do it. But what I would like to see is under the Share Your Files option in roster sharing, there should be an option to share images. Obviously, this is going to be something that has to be highly moderated, as you don't want anything bad getting through, but I would love to boot up a team and create a retro Tampa Bay Lightning team with the old school logo. What about the goat head logo for the Buffalo Sabres? Or the Robo Penguin for the Penguins? All these logos, I'm guessing we can't get in the game currently due to licensing issues. Obviously, they're not going to be able to add in all of these officially, but if they had it under custom logos, maybe that is a bit of a workaround. Up next, we have the addition of custom coaches. Another wishlist item that I made a dedicated video for, and that is that I want to see custom coaches come to the NHL series. So as we all know, official coaches were added into NHL 25, an amazing change. The issue was when coaches were fired. So in Detroit, Derek Lalonde. We never saw a McClellan. In Chicago, they lost Richardson. We never saw Sorensen added to the game. If we had custom coaches, we could go in and try and recreate them to the best of our ability. We could go in and we could create the whole coaching staff, associate coaches, assistant coaches, goalie coaches. We could do whatever. Also, staying on the conversation of coaches, I'd like to just see the ability to move them around team to team. So if someone does get fired, like a Jim Montgomery in Boston, we can go and move him around to St. Louis without having to wait for a roster update from EA Sports. It was a great step getting the real coaches in. Now just give us the freedom to create our own. The next list item is the World Junior Championships in franchise mode. So as we all know, the World Junior Championships is in NHL 25. The issue is you cannot play it in franchise mode. And I've said this in the past, and I'm going to say it again here. If we added the World Junior Championships to franchise mode itself, I'd like to see it added in for a way that we're not actually going through and playing all the games of the World Junior Championships, but it really does come down more to the roster management. So I ended up coming up with this graphic now, I want to say 2 years ago. It was in one of the first wishlist videos that I put out, where let's just say in December, we have Connor Bedard here when he was still eligible for the World Junior Championships. Team Canada can come to you and ask if you want to loan out the player, so that if you say yes, he will be unavailable to play NHL games for the span of the tournament. So you yourself aren't really getting involved in the World Juniors itself, it's more a roster management decision. Do you want to let go of a player like Connor Bedard who could really help your team's lineup? Maybe you're pushing for the playoffs and all the points are necessary. Maybe in that case you say no, or if you're a rebuilding team, maybe you let the young guys go to the World Juniors. Up next we have one of my personal favorites, that is the return of the outdoor games. So I talk about this quite a bit when it comes to things I want to see return to the NHL series, and that is just so cool to have an outdoor game. We had this in the Xbox 360 era. It was just in play now. I'd like to see it implemented into franchise mode. Maybe it's just 2 teams are randomly selected and they get to play an outdoor game on January 1st. The part that confuses me, especially this year with NHL 25, we've seen so many outdoor arenas and they were added into Hockey Ultimate Team. Obviously they're quite a bit different from playing outside in a stadium here, but if you can make an arena outside at the barn, or if you can do any of these specialized arenas that they're already adding into HUD, why not add in a generic stadium template and just have it fill in for games in franchise mode? You can have it for offline as well, but with how good graphics are nowadays, I would love to see an outdoor Winter Classic return to the NHL games. Continuing with the specialized events, we have the AllStar Weekend. Again, one of those things that we saw all the way through the Xbox 360 and the PS3 generation of games, that being the All-Star game in franchise mode. And honestly at this point, I just want to see the All-Star game come back. The skills would be an amazing touch, but honestly just bring the All-Star game back first and we'll go from there. So basically it would just fill in one player at least from each team in the NHL, whoever is the top point scorer, top defender, goalie, whatever it may be, and they would auto-populate an all-star team. It's one of those bigger events on the calendar for each of the NHL seasons, and it's really been lacking from its removal back in NHL Legacy Edition. Hopefully we can see it back in the coming years. Next on the list is the reintroduction of the Stanley Cup Banner raising ceremony. Another feature that we've seen come and go throughout the years. It was in NHL 2005, NHL 06, and 07, before its removal and return in NHL 11 all the way through NHL Legacy Edition. This would see your team get its own customized Stanley Cup banner raising ceremony after winning a Stanley Cup in franchise mode. Again, not the biggest thing in the world, but it is really nice to see the banner go up in your home rink after a long season. With it being a smaller edition, maybe they bring it back here in the next couple of years. It wouldn't really take that much effort. And honestly, it would be really cool if in your franchise mode, that banner would stay there and not disappear after the ceremony. Continuing on with a similar conversation, that being jersey retirement ceremonies in franchise mode. At least to my knowledge, this would be a totally new feature for the NHL games. We already do have teams retire jersey numbers in game, but to be able to go in and customize and choose what numbers are retired, I believe would be a first. It would be a really nice touch for if you have a franchise mode going and you have a player that's been on your team for 10, 15, maybe even 20 years. It has been a big part of Stanley Cup winning teams. You would have the option to go in and retire that jersey number, maybe even get a little cutscene with the player showing the banner going up to the rafters. And really, just like the Stanley Cup banner raising ceremony, I really don't think it would take that much effort to add it to the game. Just come up with a couple of generic templates and have it autofill whenever it's time for a number to be retired. Up next, we have Hall of Fame inductions. Again, to my knowledge, I don't think we've ever really had a Hall of Fame at NHL games. Again, that one I could be wrong on. Other sport games do have it. MLB The Show here, not the best example with no inductions, just simmed up a quick season, but you do see they would appear there. NBA does it as well, where you see there LeBron James called it a career. I think this is like NBA 2K22 or something, so obviously quite a bit off on the timeline there. But once again, it would just be a nice small feature for the players who are the best of the best. Up next, we have the addition of a numerical potential system. This was an idea that I ended up proposing, I want to say almost about a year ago now, and that is scrapping the medium franchise, medium elite, medium top 6, medium top 4 potentials in exchange for a numerical value. That way you can get a better understanding of where a player is going to go and where he is going to grow to throughout his career. So Connor Bedard here, 96 overall. Not saying that's the best he can get to, but that is the average and that is the range that Connor Bedard should get to at minimum. And again, doesn't mean he's necessarily actually going to get there. He has to play well, and you have to give him time on ice to get to that 96 overall. But I think it would just be a little bit easier to understand for newer players coming into the franchise. Up next, we have the introduction of a generational potential. So this totally goes against what I just said with the numerical idea, but let's just say we keep everything the same in how it is currently. What if we added in a tier above franchise? I think it makes some sense. You have a lot of players around the NHL that you can consider franchise potential, and are franchise players for their team. But you only have a select few players that I would say are generational players. Your Connor McDavid, your Cale Makar, your Nathan McKinnons of the world should all have generational potential. Gives them a little bit of an edge up on some of those other players that are really good, but may not be generational themselves. Next up is seeing the addition of 3 team trades. So to be honest, I can see why 3 team trades haven't been added to NHL yet, and that's just because I think it would be a programming disaster. I think it would be pretty tough to add them to the game, but with that being said, if we are trying to simulate realism here, we do see 3 team trades go down quite a bit in the NHL, especially around the trade deadline when you are getting teams retaining on players. So hopefully, somehow they can figure out and make this feature work so we can have it in franchise mode ourselves. But along with 3 team trades, I would also like to see conditional draft picks. Don't have its own separate entry for this, but it's again another thing that we see quite a bit around the NHL trade deadline, as teams are trading draft picks that can either upgrade or downgrade regardless of how far a certain team goes in the Stanley Cup playoffs. We also see first round picks that are protected quite a bit being traded. So if a team ends up winning the draft lottery, that pick may be protected and slide to the following year. So again, with 3 team trades and conditional draft picks, they would both be amazing changes to see implemented into franchise mode. Next up, we have the ability to view lines in the off season. So for me, this has always been just a really big annoyance, is that I can't really see what my team is looking like in the offseason. If you guys have been watching the Pittsburgh Penguins franchise mode that I've been putting out, you'll see that each and every single offseason that we have, I have to go on like a notepad and come up with what I think the lineup is going to be looking like. It would be nice if I could just do that in game and having some slots being unfilled as I'm looking to try and get players in the offseason. Again, I don't think this would be very hard to implement. You already have the edit line screen. Just keep it after the draft and let me fill it in myself over the course of the summer months. Next up, we have the addition of suspensions. I gotta say, I'm actually really surprised that in current day games, we don't have suspensions. That just being because I think you could work it exactly the same, or if not very similar, to how injuries work. Again, it's going to be different if you're playing the games itself and you take a penalty that is deserving of a suspension, but if you're just simming through games, it could just be a pop-up of, you know, a player did something in a game and he is going to be unavailable for 3 to 5 games. And then maybe if they were able to have better computer logic and all that stuff, if you are a repeat offender, that's when you would see longer suspensions of 10 games plus. So again, I don't think it's anything that would be too hard to add. Again, I have no idea. I'm not a game designer at all, but I would love to see it added to the series. Next up is the addition of the long-term injury reserve. So when it comes to LTIR, as much as I want to see it come to franchise mode, I just don't see it ever becoming a reality. Once again, just because I think it would be a bit of a nightmare to add. So Torrey Krug here for an example, you can say the same thing even more about a Gabriel Landeskog. So if these players are on LTIR, how are you going to work it so that when they come back they are counting against the cap and that teams are not over the salary cap at the same time? I think it would just get pretty messy with all these players, all the large salaries. I guess you could just say that you can't play a game unless your team is salary cap compliant, and then those players would have to remain scratched until the cap space is made available. I suppose that is a way you could do it. I just don't see it ever getting added to the NHL series. Next up is player trade histories. So MLB does a fantastic job of this themselves. Basically everybody in your organization, you can see how and when you acquired them. With NHL, I would actually like to see this take the next step. Honestly, if we got something similar to MLB though, I would not be complaining. So what I'm proposing is, under the player screen, you go all the way over to awards and you have an extra tab, and it can show you who players were traded for, whether it be draft picks or players. It just adds more storylines, it adds more life, it adds more depth to the overall franchise mode experience as a whole. Again, I don't know how realistic that is. I don't know if that's something that can be tracked and can be auto-filled there, but it would be really nice to keep track of trades in-game and not having to use external tools. Next up on the list is the expanded award history. So this was something that was a big part of the NHL 2K days. I don't believe ever was in an EA Sports NHL, but you could go all the way back, no matter what single award it was. Just looking at Stanley Cup winners here, if you want to see who was the inaugural Stanley Cup winner, you have the ability to do that. Same thing goes for all the individual awards, but it's just nice to have if you're going deep into a franchise mode. If you're planning to go 20, 25 years, it's something, once again, you can keep track of all this stuff yourself. We do at least have the player award screen now, but it's nice to have it all in one place so you're not searching for certain award winners. Next up, we have the reintroduction of the GM tracker. So this is one of the things I really do want to see come back. I don't want to say the most, but it's definitely up there on my list. Another one of those things that we had constantly throughout the Xbox 360 and the PS3 games era. You could win your different awards from different experiences you had as a general manager. I believe here if I go to GM tasks, like play a game, just easy things like that. You'll get task points, win 10 in a row, you'll get 30 points, and you can continue to rank up. So you have other tasks like just signing free agents. You have make your goalie make the NHL All-Star game. Again, it would be nice to just have the All-Star game back, but it was cool that there was tasks around that. Win the Hart Trophy, win the Stanley Cup, there's different awards for that. And yeah, like even like freeing up salary cap, $500K to $1 million, you would get 6 task points to rank up your overall GM. And a lot of these things you would just do without even having to pay attention to them. Continuing on, we have the GM reputation. I don't know why we don't have this. So this save, I am the Tampa Bay Lightning. It makes sense that our rival team is Florida, so it's going to be harder to make trades with the Panthers. Where teams like Detroit and San Jose, we have an A and A+, that means we might get the better deal from them. So stuff like that, it's small things that come together that make the mode fun again. Going over here, we have the team power rankings. So this would show you week to week, if your team's playing good, you're going to go up the power rankings, where if you're on a losing streak, you're going to go down toward number 30. You also had just tasks, you had the standings page, This is really nice for, again, if you're getting deep into franchise mode, you don't have to write these numbers down. They're all there for you. We're at 3-6 currently, has your goals for, goals against, and it shows how far you made it in the playoffs. You also have the different teams that you're on, the different amount of years you were there. You have your staff screen, which you can spend those upgrade points on. So just right here, we're going to go and upgrade the amateur scout, and hopefully he will be more accurate. So the GM tracker had a ton of small things that definitely added to the overall immersion of franchise mode. Next up is the live start date. So currently you load into an NHL 25 franchise mode, you are always stuck on the same day. You're always starting in September, right before the NHL preseason. So if I get this game on Christmas Day or Boxing Day, why do I have to still start at the preseason? I want to see a mode where it auto-populates everything that has happened in the real NHL, and if I get the game on Christmas, I load into the franchise mode on Christmas Day with the record that that team has in real life. I think if this ever was added, I don't think it's gonna be, but I think if it ever would be, it would be tied to the official EA Sports roster updates. That's just something that I think would be easiest for them, programming what teams are at what record and all that stuff. Otherwise, I don't really know how that would be possible. Either way, would love to see it added to NHL. Next item on today's list is the introduction of Eras mode. I would love to see Eras mode come to NHL. Obviously first made popular by the NBA 2K side of things, they had tons of different options available. The LeBron era, the Kobe era, the Jordan era. Just think of that in NHL terms. You could have the Gretzky era, the Crosby era. You could go all the way back to like the Beliveau era if you really wanted to. There'd be so many different options to get the league in whatever state it was. Like if you even wanted to do something where it's tied to the original 6, you start with those 6 teams, maybe you have the expansion that came in the 70s, and you would see the NHL expand to a certain amount of teams. It's just really cool to actually have that stuff that we can't technically do in game, even though we do have amazing creators like a Snipe and Score, who makes these throwback rosters. Unfortunately, there is limitations to that, where we can't have the league continue to grow throughout franchise mode. And then continuing on that conversation, relocation and expansion within the mode itself. So I think this is something that is especially present just because of what we saw with the Coyotes last season. So if you load into franchise mode currently, you're stuck with whatever teams you load in with. You can do the expansion draft, that's fine, but you're not going to see any changes in those teams going forward. What I'm proposing is, like, let's just say the AI team, let's say the Coyotes were still there, and they're struggling 10 years down the line, they're consistently at the bottom. Maybe the computer makes the decision to relocate, and you'll just get a pop-up saying that the Coyotes are moving to Utah down the line. So stuff like that, I guess you'd have to have some kind of safeguards there too, where you're not going to have teams relocating too much, and you're not going to have like the Toronto Maple Leafs relocating to like Alaska or something crazy like that. I think there's ways to do it where it would make some sense. And then continuing the discussion kind of similar to Eras mode, like let's say I'm the expansion team, I'm the 33rd team in the NHL. So if they go to 33 teams, they're going to go to 34 at some point. Where in franchise, you never see that 34th team come. It would be nice like 2 or 3 years into the mode itself, those teams would be added and they would have another expansion draft you'd have to go through. And maybe you can cap it at a certain number. If you only wanted to have 34, you can do that. And maybe cap it all the way up to 40 if you wanted to go crazy and have the league expand over the coming years. Next up, we have the introduction of a free agent frenzy minigame. So I've talked about this in the past, and I wanted to see better negotiations. We actually did somewhat get that in NHL 25, at least when it's working properly. What I'm saying is, for free agency, have it similar to the trade deadline, where it's a timed event, at least for the first day. So Brock Besser, I have to talk to him within a certain period of time, otherwise he may sign with a computer team. Currently, you have all the time in the world to decide what you want to do, and once you simulate forward a few days, then you get players signing. But let's have that change, and let's have players signing in real time. So if I wait too long on Brock Besser on this screen, I'm going to go and have to take a look at an option like a Brad Marchand, for an example. And it's going to be having to get that players in interest in your organization up before they sign with another team. That way it just makes it a little bit more dynamic, makes franchise mode a little bit more challenging, which I think is needed as well. Like I said, you have all the time in the world to decide what players do I really want. Doesn't mean they're going to necessarily sign with you, but if you add that time crunch in there, I think it could be a lot of fun. Continuing on from the free agent frenzy to contract terminations in season. So this again is a smaller addition, but it would replicate, what we see every now and then. That is a player mutually deciding to terminate a contract. And this could especially tie in well with the conversation system, as both sides would have to agree to terminate a contract. A perfect example is Jesse Puljujarvi. He had a mutual termination with the Pittsburgh Penguins, that leaving him as a free agent. And that is going to tie in with my next point here for today's list, that being a living world. So let's say you mutually terminate your contract with Jesse Puljujarvi. Currently, he's just going to sit in the free agent list and rot unless he is signed by another team. What I'm saying is, have Puljujarvi go and sign in Finland. Let him go rip up the European leagues, do whatever he wants to do. And in that following summer, if he's doing really good, then maybe he gets another chance at an NHL team, or he stays in Europe. That way you see players not just sitting in the free agent pool, you see those other leagues actually do matter in franchise mode, and you can see players going back and forth between them. Another example, the ever controversial Tony DeAngelo. We saw him go over to Russia earlier in the year, and then he signed a contract with the New York Islanders. It's the bouncing back and forth of different leagues and players which keeps the mode alive, and it's just better than having them sit there doing nothing, adding no stats to their totals. But moving on, our next list item is team rebranding. So once again, this is something from the NBA 2K side that you can do. You can request to rebrand your team. You do have to have certain ownership and different stakes in your franchise mode to be able to do that. Also, just a uniform redesign or an arena redesign. You used to be able to do the jersey redesign with a expansion team, but I believe they actually took that out in NHL 25. But it would be nice just if you're a losing team for a long time, you win the first overall pick, you look to rebrand your team, you're going in a new direction, let me change the look of the team up. Unfortunately, you can't actually do that currently. And honestly, why not? Give us the freedom, it's an offline franchise mode, let us have some fun. Next up is another smaller feature, but another one I want to see in nonetheless, and that is the ability to use smaller arena options. So if you guys didn't know, we actually do have 5 rinks that you can't use for your NHL team that are locked to your AHL team. And these are actually some of the more unique arenas in the game. And honestly, it makes no sense to actually have an NHL team playing out of here. I totally do get that. But once again, it's an offline mode. We're looking to have fun here. Some of these are very unique. You have the actual triangle-shaped roof one here. Again, would your team ever really be playing out of here? No, probably not. But it changes up the visuals, and I don't know, something I would like to see just as an option if you would like. The next list item is less top AI generated prospects early into the mode. So this is one of those pet peeve things that drives me insane. As someone who's trying to fill out real life draft classes, why are we getting these guys added in? Max McGillney, likely going to be a medium elite talent, not a real guy, why is he here? Going down, we have another medium top 6. Likely going to be medium top 6, who knows? He could end up being medium elite. It's not fully scouted. Still, nonetheless, why are they here? You have Gerard Ponikarovsky. It just, Talixin. It just doesn't make any sense. I think the game should almost realize there should be a standard. You have 5 medium elite players, which is what they set in later years. Just put a system in. As long as the game realizes there is those 5, don't add any more to it. You can do the same thing with medium top 6s. Maybe you have to have at least 30 to 35 medium top 6 players just for later years in franchise mode so players develop and all that stuff. As long as those players are in the draft, just don't add any more. And from what they said this last year in, I believe it was their franchise mode deep dive, they said they added even more of these players to the mode, which is definitely frustrating. I get if you're playing with the base rosters, they have to be there, you have to have those made up guys, but for playing with custom rosters, they do not need to be there. Next up is the introduction of the ECHL to franchise. One of those things that once again would be nice to have in the mode itself. If I want to have another league to develop players in, I should be able to do that. You see players that aren't always good enough to be playing in the AHL, they get sent down to the ECHL until they're ready. It's one of those things where I think it was never added in, at least for a while, because not every NHL team had an ECHL affiliate. I believe that's what the reasoning more or less was, but honestly, if there's teams that don't have an affiliate, I think it's only going to be like one or two. Just make up a team for those ones. You saw when Seattle and Vegas came into the game, they made up AHL teams for them because they didn't technically have one their first years. So just make up a couple of ECHL teams and assign all the real ones to their respective NHL teams. Getting toward the end of today's list, making goaltending stats actually matter. And this is a tough one to balance because you want there to be some variety. You don't want the same players to be putting up the same numbers each and every single sim. But also, you don't want guys just coming out of nowhere where it makes no sense. Like perfect example here, Freddie Anderson, 88 overall in game, has a below 900 save percentage on the year, 3.25 goals against, on a pretty good Carolina team. This is post adding in the Mikko Rantanen trade. They have a good team in front of him. He should be playing a lot better than that on a contending team. Where if you go down, you have Vijmelka on a Utah team who's probably not too bad, but I would say Carolina is definitely a lot better. He has a 920 save percentage and a 2.68 goals against average, despite being a 4 overall lower. And I know, like, there has to be some variety. It can't be the same things, and some goalies have to play better than others. But I'm just tired of seeing random low overall goalies always playing better, always seeing them at the top of the league. You have like UPL there, 86, must have grown, only putting up an 895 save percentage. Just make it make a little bit more sense. I'm tired of seeing guys like backup goalies like Eric Comrie putting up like 928 save percentages and winning the Vezina. It just needs to make a little bit more sense to me. The second last item on today's list is the introduction of team practice mode. So I was actually pretty surprised. The last time I put out a NHL wishlist video for franchise mode last year, I actually saw quite a few comments asking for the return of practice mode. So we used to have this once again in the 360 and PS3 days where you had your team practice, your shooting practice, skating practice, goalie practice, and you could do that with the team that you assembled yourself. You can choose all the different options. If I want to have a 5-on-0 breakout, I can go and practice that. I can substitute all the players that I want to play with, and then you can either play the offense or defense if we had defense playing in this scenario, and you could just mess around with your team. Personally, I wouldn't use it myself, but honestly, it's one of those things. It should probably be in there, so hopefully it gets added back soon. And the last item on today's list is improve sim speed and bugs and glitches fixes. So I gotta be honest, it's a little bit sad that I even have to put this on today's wish list, but like really, it did hold NHL 25 down quite a bit. Even going from NHL 24, even to NHL 2004, like this example I'm showing, the sim speed has been horrific this year. It got slowed down like crazy, and I don't know why that is on current consoles. This is next generation only. We should not be having these issues. Same with the bugs and glitches. There were so many issues with the conversation system, to being able to play like more than 82 games in a season. There were just so many small things that really hurt franchise mode this year. And this was supposed to be a big year for the mode. This is where we were supposed to see those huge improvements that we've been wanting to see for so many years. And we got a lot of nice additions, but does it really mean anything when they don't work that good? And that's kind of the struggle that I think this year's game had. But hopefully in future years we can see a little bit better polish and just a better overall experience for players in the mode. But that is it. That is my whole entire wish list for franchise mode in future NHL games. I'm really curious, what do you guys think? Again, I don't think we're going to get a ton of this stuff. If we're lucky, maybe we'll get a few items here in the next year or two. It's really hard to say. This was supposed to be our big franchise mode year, so we might not get a few of these changes for a couple of years now. It's really hard to say. But I'm very curious. What do you guys think of today's list? Is there anything else that I missed? Definitely leave that down in the comments below. But that is going to do it for today's video. I will see you all in the next one.